The storm ripped through everything in its path. Houses flattened, streets flooded, families left with nothing. But when the skies cleared, one home stood tall, untouched by nature's fury. That should have been a blessing. Instead, it became a curse. The homeowner, a black man who had survived the unimaginable, soon found himself accused of the unthinkable. The HOA claimed his survival wasn't luck. It was witchcraft. And then came the lawsuit, $10 million. How does survival turn into persecution? And why did his very existence become a threat? Marcus Johnson was a quiet man with simple dreams. He had worked tirelessly for years, saving every dollar to buy his modest home in a coastal neighborhood where hurricanes were a constant threat. For him, that house wasn't just brick and wood. It was security, the proof that all his struggles had meant something. Neighbors knew him as the man who mowed his lawn on Saturday mornings, waved at passing cars, and always kept to himself. When the hurricane warnings came, Marcus boarded up his windows like everyone else, bracing for the worst. He prayed not to lose everything he'd built. And when the storm passed, he couldn't believe what he saw, his home still standing strong, untouched while destruction stretched for miles. It should have been a moment of gratitude. Instead, it was the beginning of his nightmare, because survival, for Marcus, would soon be twisted into suspicion. At first, Marcus thought he was lucky. While others mourned the loss of their homes, he offered bottled water and helped neighbors sift through rubble. Some thanked him, but others whispered. They pointed at his house, untouched by the storm, and their eyes narrowed. In a community where nearly everyone had lost something, his survival became less a blessing and more a target. Rumors spread quickly. It started small. Someone muttering that no house could withstand winds like that without some kind of trick. Then came louder voices. Accusations that Marcus had done something to protect his home while the rest of the neighborhood suffered. For most people, the whispers would have died away. But for Marcus, a black man living in a mostly white, tightly controlled community, those whispers found fuel. The HOA, the same board that approved his fence color and fined him once for leaving his trash can out too long, suddenly turned its gaze on him. At first, it was subtle. Letters arrived in his mailbox claiming violations he hadn't committed. A notice accusing him of unauthorized structural reinforcements on his home, even though he'd followed every code. He was warned that his property stood out and didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic anymore. Marcus tried to ignore it. He told himself it was stress, paranoia, grief from the storm. But the letters grew bolder. One day, he received a notice unlike any other. The HOA accused him of practicing witchcraft, of using unnatural methods to shield his property from disaster. It sounded ridiculous, like something from another century, but there it was, stamped with official letterhead. First, Marcus laughed. Surely no one would believe this. Surely reason would win. But reason had no place here. Neighbors began crossing the street to avoid him. Parents pulled their children away from his yard. At community meetings, his name was whispered like a curse. The HOA piled on, filing claim after claim, until finally they took the unthinkable step, suing him for $10 million, alleging that his unnatural survival had somehow destabilized the community and caused greater damage to others. Marcus was stunned. $10 million, an impossible sum. They weren't just targeting his home anymore. They were targeting his very existence, painting him as something dangerous, something less than human. He tried to fight back, hiring an attorney, but the hostility only grew. Anonymous notes appeared on his porch. "We know what you are." His tires were slashed. One morning, a dead bird lay at his doorstep. What began as whispers of suspicion had transformed into a storm of hatred. And Marcus realized something chilling. The hurricane hadn't destroyed his life. His own community was doing that for him. And the worst was still to come. The day of the hearing arrived. Marcus walked into the packed community hall where the HOA had staged its so-called trial. Neighbors filled the seats, their faces cold, their eyes locked on him as if he were some dangerous intruder rather than a man who had lived among them for years. He could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on him, each glance carrying suspicion, contempt, even hatred. The HOA board sat at the front, papers stacked high, their accusations laid out like weapons. Words like unnatural, suspicious, and threat echoed through the room. They weren't just questioning his home anymore, they were questioning his humanity. His lawyer tried to object, to remind them that hurricanes are acts of nature, not sorcery. But the board twisted every fact, painting Marcus as an outlier who didn't belong, someone who had to be punished to restore balance. Then came the moment that cut deeper than anything else. A neighbor Marcus had once helped dig out after a flood stood up, pointing a finger at him. Her voice cracked as she accused him of bringing evil into their community. The crowd murmured, nodding, whispering, feeding on each other's fear. And Marcus realized this wasn't just about money. This was about erasing him. His hands trembled as he looked around the room, searching for one friendly face, one person willing to speak truth. But there was only silence. He stood alone, a man condemned not by evidence, but by prejudice, by a centuries-old fear repackaged in modern form. When the gavel came down, the board announced their decision. Marcus was guilty of damaging the community and liable for $10 million. Gasps filled the room, not of shock, but of satisfaction. His nightmare had been sealed with a single strike of wood. In that moment, Marcus felt the walls close in. The hurricane hadn't destroyed him, this verdict had. And yet, as he walked out under the cold stares of his neighbors, he knew one thing. The storm outside had passed, but the storm of injustice had only just begun. Marcus never paid the $10 million. He couldn't. Instead, he lost something far more precious. His peace, his place in the community, the belief that hard work and fairness were enough to protect him. His house, once a symbol of perseverance, now stood as a reminder of how quickly survival can be twisted into suspicion when seen through the lens of prejudice. He eventually moved away, leaving behind walls that had withstood a hurricane but could not withstand hate. But Marcus's story doesn't end with him. It echoes a long history in America where Black resilience is too often punished instead of celebrated. From neighborhoods that labeled survivors as threats, to systems that twist justice into persecution, the message has been the same. Survival is not enough when your very existence is treated as a crime. Think about it, what does it say about us when a man who endures disaster becomes the one accused of causing it? When the strongest house on the block is not seen as hope, but as danger. This isn't just about one man, one neighborhood, or one absurd lawsuit. It's about a deeper storm that has been raging for generations. The storm of racism, fear, and control. Marcus's fight may not have made headlines, but it forces us to ask, how many more stories like his are buried, untold, because people were silenced by power, by fear, by hate? The hurricane destroyed homes. The HOA destroyed trust. But the real disaster was the injustice that followed. And until we confront the systems that allow stories like Marcus's to happen, the storm will never truly end. So the question is, when will we stop blaming the victims and start tearing down the walls of racism that still stand among us?